Blue like Lurelin Bay. Written and narrated by Spicy Chestnut. Link had blue eyes. They were a special kind of blue, his mother used to say. Bright, electric blue like the waters of Lurelin Bay. He got them from her, he knew. He still remembered her enough to recall that much. But hers were softer, tempered with age, or perhaps hers had simply always been a little darker, a little more green. From a young age, he remembered people staring when they met him for the first time. His father's friends used to say he had the eyes of a wolf. The village women would coo over how striking they were, what a heartbreaker he would be. The other children would simply gawk. Some would even shy away, sneaking covert glances at his eyes as they did so, as if they were the only value of his person and they did not wish to offend him with the sum of their disinterest. It made him feel self-conscious. He didn't want to be a wolf, and he didn't want people to be so consumed by such a small feature that they didn't see, well, him. Over time, he began to feel as though his blue eyes were wrong somehow. A burden. A hindrance. Perhaps that was what got him to pick up a sword. He saw the way people looked at his father while he practiced his forms, the way their eyes tracked his weapon when he sparred. Perhaps people wouldn't pay so much attention to his eyes when there was a blade in his hand. That, of course, backfired spectacularly when it became clear how prodigious he was with that blade. Everyone was looking at him then. As he was carted around Hyrule to shadow his father, he suffered the same problem he had had in the village. "Oh, what a striking young man! Look at those eyes!" "He's got wolf's eyes, this one." "Such a stunning shade of blue." On and on it went. Even the one friend he did manage to find remarked upon them, though unlike the others, it did not make her shy away. "Your eyes. They are like the luminous stone around the domain. They remind me of home," Mipha had said in that soft voice of hers, with the touch of a reminiscent smile. It was the first time anyone had commented on them in a way that made him feel they were, perhaps, not as burdensome as he'd come to fear. But the way she looked at him, staring with such rapt intent, had dredged up all that old self-consciousness anyway. As he began his formal knight's training, he learned of the knight's code and sought solace in its restrictions, in the way he was expected to bow and defer and blend into the background. Few would pay such close attention to him in such a role. But then he drew the sword, and that temporary reprieve vanished. If he had garnered attention before for his swordsmanship, now the eyes of the entire kingdom were upon him. His eyes, once merely striking, became the eyes of the goddess's chosen, eyes that would strike fear into the hearts of Hyrule's enemies. As he was appointed a member of the royal guard, he redoubled his efforts to disappear. He would fall to silence and stillness, remaining unheard and unseen as much as possible. For a while, this worked. So busy was the kingdom in preparing for the calamity, few paid such a stoic knight much mind. Though the price was to remain isolated and alone, perhaps it was not such a burden if he could hold on to himself. And then, one day, he met the princess, and his understanding of the strange attentions his eyes always garnered began to change. She was in the western courtyard within the castle, assisting Sheikah researchers with Guardian experiments. He had seen her before from afar, during his induction ceremony, but he had never seen her up close. For now he could see that which he couldn't at a distance. Her eyes. He stood transfixed at his post in the courtyard, staring. They were such a vibrant shade of green, like the tropical flora of Faerun, or the rich mosses that grew within the lush forest of the Deku tree. Her eyes widened with excitement whenever she managed to make the Guardians move, and narrowed in concentration whenever she encountered a problem. And whenever she stepped into the sun at just the right angle, her eyes positively sparkled, hints of amber rising from within their depths. The princess was renowned for her beauty, but no one had ever mentioned her eyes. They illuminated her features like the sun cresting the horizon on a dewy morning. Was this what people saw when they looked at him? Were they similarly transfixed? If so, he could perhaps better understand their stares. But ever alert, a whirring and clicking from afar caught his attention, and he turned just in time to see one of the guardian heads spinning, coming to life. The eye at its center grew brighter, and on instinct Link acted. With little weaponry about, he grabbed the nearest item, a silvered pot lid, and dashed in front of the princess with it in hand. He arrived just in time, deflecting a beam of light up into the sky. The researchers fell into a frenzy in their efforts to deactivate the machine, but Link turned his attention to the princess, who had fallen in surprise, jostled by his hurried movements. She stared unseeing at the guardian, still in shock and overwhelmed by confusion. Link extended a hand. "Are you all right, princess?" She turned her gaze up to him, and Link was once more entranced by her eyes, glittering shades of emerald and turquoise in the afternoon light. He was struck, then, by how truly beautiful she was. Her eyes roved over his face, slowly taking him in before they settled on his eyes like so many had before her. But as her mouth fell open in a small O, her own eyes wide and wondering as she took in his most prominent feature, he felt a very different reaction than the awkward self-consciousness that had plagued him for so much of his life. Instead, heat crept up his cheeks and a warmth settled in his belly, a trembling in his heart he had never before felt. It was a moment before she took his hand, gripping tightly, and he had to remind himself to pull her up off the ground. "Thank you," she said breathlessly, her eyes still transfixed on his. Link felt his heart flutter. She dusted off her pants before turning from him toward the researcher still fretting over the guardian, and he turned to watch her go. The bright viridian wonder of her eyes as she gazed at him was fixed firmly in his mind as he returned to his post, and he thought, perhaps for the first time in his life, that maybe his eyes weren't such a burden after all.